Okay, so we've taken care of that. So the first two items on the agenda is one is the meetings at the library and what we need to do to try and get that restarted. And the second being what's happening with the Safeway funds, which is that we now are waiting on the planning director's response to the letter that we sent him. And we'll have to continue on with those. The next item was, I mentioned this when I first got on with Ken, an update on the housing study. And Ken, you were saying that not much has happened because one of your committee members is not available.
Yeah, Brian has been doing such great work with the numbers. His older son is in the hospital, and so he is preoccupied for the next few days. But it sounds like he thinks he's going to get out in a few days. And Brian, even though I know he's got a lot on his plate, he's been really good at trying to move this forward. Okay. So I'm sure he will surface soon.
What would be the next step that you were talking about? Was that going on to look at what the large lot?
Yeah, that was the next step. And then
okay.
I think we should, after that, get together the larger subcommittee, that includes a couple people on this call to kind of figure out what our next steps, since after we've done some of the number crunching.
Yeah. Okay. And so I think that's about it. Then the last item actually on the agenda was an update on state legislation. And my understanding is that SB 10 has now passed the Assembly and is going to be going back to the Senate for concurrence in amendments that were made in the Assembly, which is usually just sort of a formality. So that's at that point, it's probably, I would guess, maybe in the next week or 2 weeks, it's probably going to be going to the governor. And SB 9 is, I believe, supposed to be coming up on the Assembly floor sometime in the next week or so. I don't know exactly when. I don't know. David, do you have any further news on that?
Not on SB 9. I do think a vote is coming shortly. It all depends on whether or not they can get the votes. So okay. They're still working on that. There's a lot of folks who voted for SB 10 who did so kind of as a choice. They'll vote for that, but they won't vote for SB 9. So it's going to be very, very close.
Yeah, well,
probably by one vote, my guess.
Kirk, you had a question or comment? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I got stuff from the California Preservation Foundation, which was lobbying for some protection for historic resources, and I think the
for which SB 9 or SB 10?
Well, I think for anyway, they got pretty far, and then Scott Wiener nixed it. So I can't remember which bill.
That must be SB 10, because SB 9 is by Tony Atkins.
Wiener's bill. Yeah.
SB 9 also is explicit about the exclusion of any sort of historic districts.
Right.
Specific to exclude them, or?
Right, exactly. So they are not eligible under the bill.
Eligible for
to have the 4 units.
So the bill wouldn't apply in neighborhoods that have historic district designations.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So at any rate, and I don't know what's happening with AB 1401. David, do you have an update on where that is?
Yes, it has to get through Senate appropriations tomorrow.
Oh, it's tomorrow. Okay.
And that is totally up in the air.
Huh.
So
totally up in the air whether it's going to be heard or what will happen with it.
It'll be heard, and it'll have to get off suspense file.
Okay.
So it's really just up to Senator Portantino, who's the chair of that committee, whether or not he wants to move it forward or not.
I see.
Yeah. I think, I'm not sure, but the pro tem may be pushing for the bill too, perhaps in exchange for the members' vote on SB 9 in the Assembly. It is an Assembly bill. A lot of horse trading going on. This is where it gets fun.
This is the sausage factory.
Yeah. the smoke-filled back rooms portion of the legislative session.
It's the formerly smoke-filled back rooms. There's no smoke anymore, but there's still back rooms.
Right. Well, they have different.
Well, we have an insider with David to tell us what's going on.
I don't get to be in the rooms, but I get to hear from people who have heard from people who've heard from people who are in the rooms.
Okay, so, and I guess there are a couple of other bills that, and I don't think any of the other bills have application really to Rockridge. I think those were really the three that had the most issues that, and I may try and put an update in, I'll try and put an update on the website as to what's happened with those.
You might look at Senate Bill 478 by Scott Wiener, which changes the maximum FAR and lot sizes that can be used by jurisdictions. I don't think it applies to Oakland. I think Oakland would not be impacted based
Yeah,
on our R1 zoning, but it may be. So it might be something to
yeah,
look at.
I'll take a look at that. Yeah,
What does that do? Does that prevent large lot zoning, David? Like
Yeah, it would kind of cap maximum
maximum lot
or
size,
minimum lot
minimum.
size and maximum FAR, or is it minimum FAR?
Like
It would lot size and FARs basically to facilitate more more construction on single family lots, and
So
it's for
Atherton-
projects or places zoned for less than 10 units.
Atherton is out of luck then if that passes.
well, I think the zoning in Rockridge generally is about around between 10 and 12 units, 10 and 12 units per acre.
Yeah,
So-
Atherton is 10 or 12 acres per unit.
Yeah.
So,
It's pretty crazy. I think Los Altos also has a crazy high lot size.
Yeah. At any rate, okay, I'll take another look at that, but I
Yeah,
think I had concluded that it didn't affect us.
yeah, I think you're right. Just flagging that.
Yeah, I'll take another look. But I don't know, does anybody else have any items that they want to bring up that we should be discussing tonight?
No, I mean, just, I think maybe Leonora wasn't on when we were talking about putting a further discussion of the, oh God, I always forget the Ridge. I always forget the name of it, the Ridge, on the next board meeting, since we talked to
Oh, yeah, that was, we had talked about that one informally at the very start when we were on. Where the question is the follow-up on the meeting we had with TRC, and in whose court the ball is. Is it in our court or their court?
I think it's in our court, but we hadn't really decided how to make the play that is in our court.
To be honest, my sense is that we can weigh in with whatever we like, but until we get, let me put that another way. I did not get a sense from them that they were really excited about listening to what we wanted.
I might have been reading into it, Leonora, but I kind of felt like they didn't think that we could get them out of their jam on housing, but they were sure interested if we could. And that they were holding out some hope that some kind of pressure at some point could help.
I'm
think
not
they're
that optimistic.
Yeah.
I heard them, with Uba, and they would love to build more. But
Yeah, I mean, the things that
stuck.
they're stuck. They don't want to build any of those things that they're putting out there particularly. And the things that they might most want to build, like a large big box, are going to be the things we least want.
Well, I'm
Yes,
not
I,
even
in
sure they
fact, have
want a
some
big box.
background on one of those.
What's that?
I have some background on one of the companies. The name came up at the meeting, and that is Lowe's.
Oh,
They've done some interesting awfulness to various communities, and so
Yeah.
I think we should all know about that. I will post a link to that.
Is it design awfulness or across all kinds of awfulness relating to humans?
It's tax break awfulness.
Oh,
I don't know if Oakland will do that for them, right?
It's not so much about the communities giving them a tax break. It's on how they exploit various loopholes in tax law and in appraisals, comparables.
Yeah.
They
to get out of
basically
pay.
will pay less
Yeah,
than what the actual appraised value is, because they'll make the argument that what they are building is actually cheap and does not have staying power.
I mean,
Yeah, so they'll compare their up and running and profitable store to a closed shuttered one somewhere close by, among other tricks.
I guess what I would just say is, I'm not quite sure what our next move should be, but the one thing I am sure of is that we should not do nothing, because something's going to happen to us if we do nothing, and we're not going to like it.
Agreed. Even if the likelihood is low, I feel like we have an obligation
Yeah.
to try.
I mean, and again, I'll just say, the only things that might make some economic sense there that are not housing are the worst, the lows. I mean, that may make some economic sense for TRC. The other things I thought were not. But so like, we want to be careful, because if we do nothing, we're not just going to get something mildly bad. We're going to get something really bad.
I agree that we should speak up, and I also think we should be bold with putting it out there that we believe that there should be housing there.
I don't quite, maybe David, if you could, this is something I always feel like I should understand, but don't, in terms of how the housing element work could help us here. Is it just that the city would have to, I mean, I'm not even going to try. I'm sure you can explain it.
So the city might, so take a step back.
Yeah.
The city has a pretty big arena number going into the sixth cycle, like 3 or 4 times higher than the previous cycle, right? So the city is going to be under pretty significant pressure to find the sites throughout the city that can reasonably house new development. They also can't just zone anything, right? They have to actually show and prove that the sites that they've selected would actually result in housing. So they will look at a big site like that and say, hey, this is a way for us to meet our housing element. So they may include it in their housing element. I just don't know legally how that would change the agreement that the developers have with landowner, and if it ties their hands and forces the landowner to say, okay, actually you can't do housing because the city's now saying it has to be.
Well,
I think the problem with that is a legal problem, is that as long as the city just says in its housing element, this would be a site where we'd like to see housing, then they're not in any trouble. But on the other hand, the owner has no, duty or even requirement or anything to consider housing.
So ideally, what would happen is,
if they tried to say you can only do housing here, then they would have some force, but they would also have a lawsuit on their hands.
but I'm not sure, Stu, I defer to you. I'm not an attorney, but I don't think, as long as we leave an economic use, which housing is perhaps the best economic use in this, I don't know that it's a taking. I mean, I do not pretend to be an attorney, but I just, what I've always been told by attorneys that I've worked with is, if you leave a reasonable economic use, but you take away some others, as long as there's a reasonable economic use left, it's not a taking.
That's true, but the question is it a reasonable economic use when the owner has said very forthrightly and continuously for many years, I am not going to do housing there?
Good question. I don't know the answer, but
it's an unusual situation, but it's one we may be facing.
But, I guess this leads me to thinking about maybe our next step, our most logical next step is some kind of, fairly serious conversation with the city, whether it's with Gilchrist, so we can have 2 things to talk to him about, or whether it's with Calb or both. But that seems to me maybe to be the next step, to really kind of make a show of the colors for the city, and have them understand that we're really, they may not have any good ideas, but at least they should know we're on this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's something we could bring to the board.
I think I would second that, Ken. But I wonder just the timing of all of that. If they're going to move forward and get into a contract with Lowe's or something, that's going to happen quick. So what does our response need to be from that meeting? Or what is our only leverage? Make a statement of here we are.
Well, it's a good point, Casey. I mean, maybe the board needs to, if there's consensus on the board, write them a letter saying, thanks for meeting with us. These are our concerns. We really we understand the difficulties with housing, but we want that conversation to continue. We intend to talk to the city, just so you know. And just kind of get it out there, like get some paper out there so they think twice before moving forward on something awful.
Two points. One is whatever they do isn't going to have, it's probably going to take at least 2 years or probably 3 if, if they start now. And we should be on their case about the hazard and eyesore that exists there now. And the other thing is, I'm sure Panel and UBA would like to join forces with RCPC to, because we basically have them surrounded.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the issue of the blight there, that may be the strongest suit we have to play with the city, which is to say that if the city did come after them for nuisance, the city could force them to do something about it.
But all the city would do is force them to clean it up. It can't force them to make a land use play because of the blight, could it?
No, but the city could, in the final analysis, the city could come in there with city forces and clean it up and send them the bill.
I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think it's the money. I don't know why they don't keep it clean, but I think they're just lazy. I don't think they're.
There's zero accountability from the city. There's no code enforcement doesn't do anything. And
I think they'd probably like the city to clean it up and send them the bill. They probably wouldn't even mind that.
I also think it's tricky if we're pushing them to do something with the site and pursuing, code violations.
Yeah,
they're more likely to pick the easy low-hanging
Right.
fruit to develop it.
I don't want to be naive, and I'm not, but I kind of felt like the way to deal with those guys who met with us is to be friendly with them and to not be I don't think that the problem is them. I mean, maybe the problem on the blight is them.
well, I agree on the housing side, their hands are tied, but they are responsible for keeping that maintained, and they're not being held accountable because no one is, and so they're not doing it. So we're not being particularly cruel by reporting it to the city or mentioning it in our meeting with Gilchrist. I mean, any citizen could do it. It doesn't necessarily stem back to us, but I do think it's vital that they do that. And so we can continue to be cordial and nice to them and not write a scathing letter in the Rockridge News, but we could still make a statement. Like, we had this meeting, they presented options, and it's just not good enough for Rockridge or where we get with the board discussion.
This is what's strange to me. I mean, I assume, I haven't gone and looked. I mean, I assume that there's been no change. Is that true? In terms of, it's just weird to me that we had this meeting a couple of weeks ago, and these were like senior people, it seems, they didn't, why would they not just go clean it up? I mean, I don't get what's stopping them. I mean, they've got crews out there that are maintaining the parts that are closer to the stores. It would literally be nothing for the crews to walk down the street and clean it up. I don't really get it.
Maybe we should have a guerrilla cleaning day and send them the bill.
I think we should start by reminding them that they're supposed to clean it up.
So I'm listening to this and I heard what happened at the meeting, although I wasn't able to be there, but I think I'd like to see, the housing is going to be difficult. The city is not going to rezone that. It's been community commercial 3 for a very long time. Just listen to me, Ken. Okay. And so I doubt that they're going to do it anytime soon. And I don't think it's so. I think what we should be thinking of is, what is our response to the things that are acceptable to put in there aside from housing? I mean, I've supported housing going in there a long time, but it's difficult to get them to agree. So what is acceptable?
I just vehemently disagree. I absolutely 100% disagree.
Well, I think one of the things to keep in mind is if they wanted to convert that to residential zoning, they would need an EIR.
I mean, so?
Well, that's going to be 6 months to a year.
Well, that seems
The city is contemplating rezoning the next door site.
The what?
The CCA site, the city wants to rezone.
And that EIR has been going on for how long now?
Well,
EIRs, as you
hasn't been
know,
going on for that long.
they take a while. Stu, as everyone knows, including TRC, it's not going to be economically feasible to build housing there for a few years. There's plenty of time to do in the IR.
But they might put in something else, a store or Lowe's sooner.
Yeah.
Well,
And
not
that's
if
my
we-
concern.
Yeah.
Well,
not if
but
people
I'm
stop it.
saying, are we gonna say we want nothing? And all we want is housing? That isn't gonna fly, I think, with the community.
I hear that dilemma, and I don't dismiss it. And I hope there, you know, maybe there is a middle ground, but once there's something else there, it's there for a very long time.
Well, again, they are particularly saying we don't want something that will be there for a very long
I
time.
don't particularly believe that part of what they're saying.
So when I brought up a Lowe's to a few people, they actually liked it. I'm just saying, I'm not sure, 100% sure the community wouldn't like having some of
No,
those
All I've
options.
got to say is if people are up in arms about illusory traffic problems with CCA and they like a Lowe's, there's something wrong with the thought process.
Now, I've heard a couple of other thoughts. One of the thoughts that people, and you may recall, Ronnie, and I don't know if Leonora goes back that far, but when they were closing down actually when they were discussing what was going to come in there, when Safeway left, or Safeway moved, one of the things they talked about was a nursery.
That is a very interesting interim use. That's a real interim use.
Yeah.
Because that was what we used to have with the Longs that is no longer
Right.
there. It was a great nursery. It was kind of like a mini Target.
I don't know whether there's a market for a nursery or anything, but
Nope.
that, you know, I think though it falls into the category of how much rent is a nursery going to pay TRC? Not very much.
I don't know. It depends on what they do and how they do it. But it strikes me that a nursery might be an interim use that would fly with the community and might fly with TRC.
I think it would be fine from the community perspective.
Well, I'm a
Much
nursery
better than a
junkie.
Lowe's.
That
What's
site is way too big.
True.
It's big enough for wholesale nursery.
It'd be a little dangerous for people like Kirk and myself. I agree. I mean, to Ronnie's point, I mean, she's talked to two people, so I think we could consider doing a survey before we make a statement. But
Yeah.
I just think the only leverage that we have is to make a statement, and I don't know what the timeline looks like, and I just don't want us to get behind and all of a sudden Lowe's is in and we can't do anything about it. Whereas we did have this information in advance. And so I think I just don't want it to slip and not be a regular item or like
I agree. I think the city and, you know, people, I make assumptions about the way Oakland works and people tell me I'm too new and I'm wrong. So I might be, but I think the city would be under a certain amount of heat for permitting something like a Lowe's there instead of housing.
No.
I'm still going to say it. I could be wrong. I think you guys are not taking into account the way housing politics are today versus 2 years ago or 5 years ago.
Yeah, but the thing about it is that as you say, housing would be something that would happen in 5 years because the market's not able to deal with
A
building.
Lowe's will be there for 40 years.
So
So, you know,
a Lowe's could be put up in a year.
yeah, yes.
And I don't know how long a Lowe's would last, but the point is that housing is not going to happen for at least several years, and probably not for 5 or more. And
I wish you were wrong, but you're right. Yeah.
in the meantime, we need to be looking at things that could be going in there, and I think, for example, a nursery would certainly be preferable to a Lowe's.
I mean,
So,
I'm for a truly temporary use, and I'm very much against anything that's not.
you know, Uba and Panel did a survey, and I forget where that went. I mean, I think there were like several hundred people who responded. So I would talk to
Yeah, if
powers
you
that be about that. I mean, nobody was excited about big box. I think like,
was it an open-ended survey or was it just very limited in terms of options?
I think, I can't remember. I think it asked,
Can you make sure, can you get those results for our next board meeting?
I'll try. I think, all the things that the TRC had mentioned were
We're on the table there.
questions about that, and then like, what would you like to see?
Okay,
Uh,
open-ended
Yeah.
one.
Don't wait
Yeah,
till
so
the
I
next
mean,
board
I
meeting.
think
Put it up on
it-
Slack. Let's look at it as soon as possible.
Yeah, everybody wants more housing. I don't think anybody liked big box or fast food, but okay, well, I'll put that on making a list of people to contact. So I will do that.
Stu,
I-
quick question. Do we have, do you know if a Lowe's would need a conditional use permit? It must, right?
I
I'm
guess
not
on that site, actually, big box, I don't think is allowed, but I'm not sure about that. If it is, it probably would require a use permit.
I
I'm
recall.
trying to remember, as I was looking at the zoning, it seemed to me like big box would have problems.
Is Safeway big box?
No,
What's the difference?
Safeway's a supermarket, grocery store.
Grocery stores are
Yeah,
different.
it's
their
different.
own
But
designation.
the issue is Oakland just gives out conditional use permits really easily. I mean, we have all the restaurants on College and everything else.
Well, but the thing about big boxes, I'm not sure that big box was allowed even with a conditional use permit. I'd have to look again at the zoning, but there were a couple of things that were floated that I looked at and says, oh, wow, that doesn't fit, period. And I don't remember where big box was, whether that just needed a use permit or whether it just didn't work at all. Whether
Yeah,
it require a zoning change.
and
I
I
assume
think,
TRC has looked into that.
I'm sure they have. I guess my point is there would be an approval hearing process through, if they wanted to bring a Lowe's in, so it wouldn't necessarily steamroll through us, right? There would be opportunities to weigh
I
in.
think, well, and they'd also, I mean, from the standpoint of whether they need an EIR, I think they probably would. Admittedly, we no longer is congestion an issue, but vehicle miles traveled is, and there'd be an open question as to
I
whether.
mean, the number of cars, I think, attracted to a Lowe's versus, the CCA next door would be it would be night and day.
Well, you got to realize it's not so much the number of cars, it's where are they coming from?
Understood, but for a big box like a Lowe's, they're coming from farther than for like a grocery store.
That's true.
I don't know where else there's a Lowe's, but they could be coming from quite a
Well,
ways
there's
away.
a Home Depot in Emeryville.
Right.
Difference.
So I think, so we're gonna get the UBA and panel survey results, and are
Yeah.
we gonna
Probably.
potentially do one? Or are we gonna accept their
Well, let's-
results if we like, because we have to look at the format of the survey,
Yeah,
because sometimes it's not well
Let-
crafted.
Let's look at how it looks when we get it, and we can talk about it next board meeting.
Okay,
we also, if we do another survey, we may run into the issue of just double counting people.
Well, we
because-
wouldn't, we'd have to do it separate. We wouldn't it wouldn't be just adding the two surveys together.
Correct. I'm just saying there could be an opportunity that they would be complementary, but just cautioning what that would mean.
I mean, where did do people not like the idea of conferring with the city on this? I mean, I don't know what it hurts, even if they're lame and don't do anything. Does it hurt for us to talk to them?
I think we'd do better to talk to the community first.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's fine.
If we talk to the community and come in and say, we've done a poll and this is what people in Rockridge think, I think that makes our position a lot stronger. And here's what our board thinks. Yeah. Okay, well, I think I think we've got some direction. And unless there's anything else, why don't we'll call it a night. Thanks everyone for showing up.
Okay,
Thank you, Stu.
Good night.
Hi, everybody.
bye.
Good night.